Because Mrs. Aquino had such tremendous national appeal, because of the assassination of her husband in 1983 that gave her a sort of moral status that no other politician had, she was able to bring together behind her the entire political opposition in the country, minus the far left wing. And that was an extraordinary event that Marcos hadn't counted on, and it triumphed.
And it also would seem to me, Fred, that it's a plus in this post-Marcos period. At least she starts with a country that is, if not unified, at least strongly behind her, and that she's a popular figure in the country. So it does give her a plus the fact that she has the reform movement in the military that's supporting her and played a role in this.
Yeah, but let's look down the road for just a moment. From your observations, do you think she's politician enough? Is she strong enough to run the country?
She wasn't a year ago or 6 months ago, from what everybody told me who I talked to over there, but now she is. Some of her advisors were surprised during the campaign that she would make major decisions entirely on her own. For instance, the decision in the campaign to run under the banner of Joy Laurel's political party was made entirely by her. Some of her advisors said she shouldn't do that. Well, if she hadn't, you wouldn't have had a united opposition slate. She decided on her own. She's a much stronger person than people give her credit for. So many people said, well, she's just a housewife. Well, she was just a housewife, but I don't think she's just a housewife anymore. I think she can rule, and you have to remember, she's going to have a strong second tier made up of General Ramos, who's the Army Chief of Staff, and Mr. Enrile, the Defense Minister, and now the Prime Minister, who she's named.
That's a good point. Let's talk just a little bit about the people around her. David, you know Mr. Ramos and Enrile. What kind of people are they? Profile them for me.
Well, they're different from each other. Enrile is really a professional politician, a man who has prospered in the wing of Marcos himself, under the wing of Marcos himself for most of Marcos's presidency. A man who, as he himself admitted, learned the lessons of Marcos well when he chose to jump the other way. But on the other hand, what even the opposition has said about Enrile is that he's not really a crook. He's not an unscrupulous, totally ruthless individual. And this was known long before he jumped onto the Aquino bandwagon. He's had a lot of contacts with the opposition for a long time. He's highly respected in the McCarty business community, and he's the sort of man who could turn out to be a very able Minister of Defense under an Aquino administration. Now, the real question is who they get to run the economy. Ironically, the one Mr. Clean of the Marcos administration was Cesar Virata, who was the finance minister and then latterly prime minister. And on the whole, with the unfortunate resources that were left to him after the economy had been largely mismanaged by cronyism, he did rather well. So they do have brains there. They have a lot of skills available. One thing I would like to say about Mrs. Aquino in relation to the communist insurgency, I think she, more than anybody, is a person who could bring down from the hills an awful lot of people who went up to the hills because they thought that under Marcos there was no hope for reform in the Philippines. As you probably know, most people in the Philippines are related to most other people. People in the army have cousins who are up fighting with the NPA. So it wouldn't be inconceivable that the back of the communist insurgency could be broken by a skillful amnesty program and by the general sense of euphoria, which undoubtedly is going to sweep the country at least for a few months.
What about Mr. Laurel? Do you know him?
Yes, Laurel is a typical, experienced, very savvy, very intelligent Philippine politician of the old school. On the whole, I think he's handled himself throughout the period beginning with the announcement of the election to the present event very well. He's a moderate. In fact, you might even describe him as something of a conservative amongst the opposition. He's very pro-American. To move away from that dead-end street, as far as I can see, into a basically middle-class, middle-of-the-road direction which it now appears to be taking. And I think he has been instrumental in doing that.
Well, let's move from the people to their programs. John, if you were writing the script, what would you say are the reforms that need to be implemented first? And which ones do you think she will implement?
Well, I think quite clearly from her own political platform in the campaign, she intends to tackle the economy, which is logically the first thing she ought to do, in part because the communist insurgency feeds on the failures of the economy, and the weakness of the military is compounded by the problems of the economy. So that is the logical starting point. Her platform, as David suggests, is not by any means a leftist document. It is very much a middle-of-the-road, market-oriented kind of thing. The people she's had around her, not just reappointing Fernandez, but businessmen like Roberto Longpin from the Makati business community, are reasonable, pragmatic, practical people. And I think what they will try to do, first and foremost, is to pry the economy out of the hands of the oligarchy and try to re-attract capital into the Philippines. It's been fleeing for years now. They've got to get some of it back. They've got to get some of their own capital back, and then they've got to try to attract capital from elsewhere, from the West. So I think that'll probably be their first priority, and I think she said that pretty clearly during the course of the campaign. After that, the military, she's got Ramos in position. Ramos tried to reform the military when he was temporarily put in as chief of staff. I think now he'll have a real chance to do it.
Let's come back a little closer toward home in terms of their relations with us. She seems to have softened her position on the two U.S. military bases, Subic Bay Naval Air Station and Clark Air Base, saying apparently now that she'll honor that lease until 1991. Does that mean those bases are there to stay, or she's just giving us time?
My guess is that they're there to stay, because I think that there may be a renegotiation of the agreement, but those bases are so important in economic terms to the Philippines and to the stability of the area generally in their own security, that there may be demands and negotiation. My guess is that they're there for the indefinite future.
Do you foresee generally warm relations between the Philippines and the United States continuing?
I do, very, because I think that they have a compelling need for American economic and military help. And I see no grounds for discord, because as it turned out, the United States government handled this thing too strongly with Marcos. We looked as though we were hanging on the Marcos because of the bases. I think that Reagan disengaged at the psychological moment.
Okay, very briefly, John, you have just come from a briefing. Clearly, the United States officials are pleased with what's happening. 15 to 20 seconds, tell us what reaction here has been among government officials.
Well, I think there's a sense of relief, but I think there's also a great deal of pride. As Joe says, the United States handled this at the right moment, didn't get caught either pushing an old friend out into the traffic or clinging to him too long and getting pulled into the traffic with him.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have to discuss the issue. My thanks to our panelists for participating in this special edition of Focus.
You're listening to the Data Service of the Radio.
They're broadcasting.
Corazon Aquino is named the 13 of the expected 26 members of her cabinet. Mrs. Aquino also created a presidential commission to investigate her husband's assassination, as well as charges of official corruption during the Marcos years. We have a report from VOA's Al Pesson in Manila.
Mrs. Aquino said her Vice President, Salvador Laurel, will serve as Foreign Minister in addition to his appointment as Prime Minister, which was announced on Tuesday. She also confirmed that the leader of the military revolt that brought her to power, Defense Minister Ramos and Enrile, will retain his post. She said 12 other members of the Marcos cabinet met with her on Wednesday and offered to help in the transition. Mrs. Aquino said ending poverty and unemployment will be among her top priorities. She named businessman Jaime Oncilo's finance minister. He told reporters he hopes the Philippines' international creditors will provide some temporary relief from the heavy burden of debt payments the country must now make. He also said he believes investment will increase, helping economic growth and easing unemployment because of the honesty he says Mrs. Aquino has brought to the Philippine government. Mrs. Aquino said another top priority will be to arrange a ceasefire with communist insurgents who are active throughout the country. Mrs. Aquino named Jose Concepcion as Trade and Industry Minister. Mr. Concepcion is president of a large corporation, and he also heads a citizens group which monitored the February 7th election. The group's unofficial vote count indicated that Mrs. Aquino had won the election. Mrs. Aquino said a presidential commission on good government will look into allegations that former President Marcos and some of his associates have acquired fortunes illegally. The commission will also investigate her husband's assassination, but she said she will not ask for Mr. Marcos to be extradited. Mrs. Aquino said she'll ask her military chief of staff, General Fidel Ramos, to investigate charges of military abuses and to remove officers who have participated. The general will also fire officers who have tolerated the establishment of private armies in some parts of the country, including her home province. Al Peck, VOA News, Manila.
New Philippine Vice President Salvador Laurel was interviewed earlier today on the NBC television network by reporter Brian Gumbo. Mr. Laurel was asked what the new Aquino government priorities are now that it has taken power in Manila.
The main objective of the new government is political stability. Right now we want to unite the people, bring about reconciliation so that political stability will be speeded up. You see, political stability is the key to economic recovery. Mr. Marcos left behind an economic mess, and that's what we've got to face right now.
What will happen to those people who 24 hours ago were functioning within the Marcos government?
They have all agreed to abandon their offices. They have offered to resign. I was in conference with the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, Virata, and he has agreed to turn over his office to the opposition, now to party power. And I already took over the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because I was his appointed foreign minister this morning.
I saw where you said you would like a positive commitment from President Reagan that he'll help the Philippines. Don't you believe you have that kind of commitment?
Yes, I think he has already done that by coming out openly in favor of recognizing the new government. Now, I was referring to the aid, in terms of economic aid that is needed by the country.
Will you ask for additional aid?
Yes, I think we will need some additional aid.
What can you tell us this morning to allay the fears and the concerns of those who are greatly concerned about continued stability and safety of Subic Naval Base and Clark Air Base in the Philippines?
I don't think the United States should worry about the stability of the two military bases here. President Aquino and I are committed to respecting the two military bases until expiry date in 1991. After that, all options are open.
One final note, we note that Mr. Aquino started out on this as a reluctant candidate, as you know. Was her only goal the ouster of Mr. Marcos? Now that is achieved, what can you tell us about the extent of her commitment? Does she intend to run the government, or will she be more of a figurehead?
No, she will really run the government, but she will be availing of the talents of many of the people here whose credibility is very high. You see, we have to present a government now that will enjoy the confidence of the people, because that is exactly what Mr. Marcos' government didn't have, the confidence of the people, and that's why we collapsed. Now, our objective is to come forward with a credible government, and I believe that is the key to political stability.
I had just one last quick question. Have you any problem with America's offer of asylum to Mr. Marcos?
No, we are not worried about that, and it doesn't bother us. I think the United States did that out of humanitarian considerations. I think Mr. Marcos is entitled to be treated as a human being.
Philippine Vice President Salvador Laurel with NBC television reporter Brian Campbell during an interview on American television earlier today. The Philippines' ASEAN partners today joined several other Asian nations in welcoming the new government of President Aquino. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Nakasone pledged Japan's full support for the new government and said Japan may increase aid to the Philippines. In South Korea, leading dissident Kim Dae-jung said the Aquino presidency in the Philippines marked a turning point in U.S. foreign policy in standing by the Philippine people and democracy. China has also welcomed the new Philippine leadership. VOA correspondent Mark Hopkins in Beijing says the station appears to be reserved in Beijing.
The Chinese government gave restrained approval to the new government of Corazon Aquino Wednesday, more than 12 hours after Ferdinand Marcos resigned the presidency and left the country. A three-line statement issued by the Chinese Foreign Ministry says that China welcomes the new government of the Republic of the Philippines, formed by Mr. Aquino. The statement went on to say that China hopes that friendly relations and traditional friendship of the peoples will continue to develop. There was no mention of Mr. Marcos, but the Communist Party paper People's Daily gave front-page reports of his resignation. Western diplomats said the statement of the Chinese Foreign Ministry was diplomatically proper Chinese acceptance of the Aquino government. China has maintained friendly relations with the Marcos government since 1975. When diplomatic ties were established between the People's Republic of China and the Philippines. Mrs. Marcos traveled to China in 1985 to discuss trade relations, 3 years after Premier Zhao Ziyang visited the Philippines, where he effectively disarmed Chinese support of the Philippine Communist Party. In recent weeks, the Chinese government has taken a neutral stance toward the Philippine situation, endorsing neither Mr. Marcos nor Mrs. Aquino. The Chinese state-managed press reported Philippine developments without editorial comment and giving views of both the Marcos leadership and the Aquino opposition. Western diplomats in Beijing say that China is chiefly concerned about the future of American military presence in the Philippines. American naval and air forces there are seen as a counterweight to growing Soviet military strength in the Pacific region. Soviet warships already routinely move along the Chinese coast, from the main Soviet naval base at Vladivostok to Vietnam's Cam Ranh Bay. Mark Hopkins, VOA News, Beijing.
In response, the response is said to be mixed in the strike called by opposition parties in most Indian states to protest price increases imposed.
It's 14 hours Greenwich Mean Time, and here is the news from the Voice of America. I'm Ivan Scott in Washington. The new Philippine president, Corazon Aquino, is wasting no time in getting her government in order and in focusing on serious and immediate problems in her country. The first order of business, naming her cabinet. Reporting from Manila, VOA's Al Pessin.
Mrs. Aquino said her vice president, Salvador Laurel, will also serve as foreign minister. She's already named him prime minister as well. She chose businessman Jaime Ongpin as finance minister, an important post as the Philippines tries to deal with a huge foreign debt and a long and severe economic recession. Mrs. Aquino said that stimulating the economy and ending poverty and unemployment will be top priorities of her administration. To help in that effort, she named Jose Concepcion as Trade and Industry Minister. Mr. Concepcion is president of a large business conglomerate and is the national chairman of the Citizens Group, which monitored the February 7th presidential election. The group's unofficial vote count indicated that Mrs. Aquino won the election. Mrs. Aquino also created a presidential commission to look into alleged hidden wealth held by President Marcos and some of his friends, and to reopen the investigation of her husband's assassination. In addition, Mrs. Aquino restated her campaign promise to ask for a ceasefire with communist guerrillas who are active throughout the Philippines. Al Pessin, VOA News, Manila.
Mrs. Aquino also said she will not change her position on U.S. bases in the Philippines and will respect the agreement until it expires in 1991. After that, she said, she will keep her options open. Earlier in the day, Mrs. Aquino called on her countrymen to start healing the nation's wounds. Long agony is over, she said. We are finally free.